Hi, I'm Helen. I'm a policy officer in the social work sector and an active member of the Protestant Church in Belgium. I will talk you through this video. You may wonder why this effort for an ecumenical dialogue between the churches of Latin America and Europe on globalization was made in several encounters back and forth over the Atlantic Ocean. Moderators for this dialogue are the Anglican Bishop Julio Murray from Panama, as president of the Latin American Council of Churches, and the Reverend Ulrich Moeller from Germany for the Conference of European Churches. They met in Brussels in December 2012 to conclude the joint venture, and they will explain.
This dialogue was started as a response to the assembly of the World Council of Churches that happened in Puerto Alegre. The response was to the theme that was being dealt with, globalization, a theme that was so controversial.
There were severe arguments between the churches, specifically from the South to the European churches, because they felt that we were not committed enough, not straight to the point enough in criticizing the negative effects of globalization. And we had the feeling they put us into a corner where we didn't felt to be.
Over the past century of ecumenical movement, so much has changed. Many churches from all over the world have joined, from many different social and political backgrounds. Even when they all speak English, there seems to be a totally Babylonian confusion. So the Conference of European Churches took the initiative
to engage into a cross-continent dialogue with those who were the most critical to us Europeans, and that were the Latin Americans.
We started with the understanding that we were building trust among ourselves first. And building that trust meant that we were not only going to listen with our ears and dialogue with our mouth, but that we were going to listen with all our body and create a safe space.
But that was not easy. When the group met for the first time, they were willing to meet each other without prejudices. Rag Rolfsson from the Church of Norway explains.
For me, the most critical moment was when we arrived at our first meeting in Buenos Aires. We had all these suspicions, expecting to find hardcore Marxists on the Latin American sides, and they expecting to meet hardcore capitalists. This was somehow not resolved, but the tension lowered quite quickly, because when you meet people, you don't meet ideologies.
This Churches Dialogue group from Latin America and Europe met 5 times in 3 years. It soon became clear that although using the same words, there was a deep Atlantic Ocean between the participants on the meaning of many terms.
We find that the controversy has to deal with first definitions.
At the beginning, for the Latin Americans, justice was the main issue. For us, the climate challenge was the main issues. And it is not just a compromise now to combine both to climate justice, but it is a very important aim.
We have been living the effect of the climate change with drought and with flooding. And drought and flooding go hand in hand with the production of food for people. If the context has been affected by a flood or it's been affected by drought, the amount of food that is produced does not respond to the need of the peoples. When the church uses its voice to address climate justice, it gives the church the opportunity to address a voice that is in favor of life and health. Climate justice is not only the relationship with environment, it's the issue of justice.
Many churches in Europe are engaged in actions on globalization and climate change. For instance, the German churches and their youth groups are influencing their governments effectively. But so are the Latin American churches. For example, they are strongly involved in the conservation of the Yasuni Natural Park in Ecuador, working against plans to start drilling for oil under the park.
This is our park, right? Yeah. This is our park. You shouldn't be allowing this. What I gotta do? It's my job. What the hell's the matter with you? This is their area. It's not gonna happen.
How does it make you feel when they pump oil in the park?
I mean, I thought these parks were for the people. I mean, I bring my kids to this park. What about...
No, you gotta talk to your representative. What the hell's going on here? I don't have any power here. Are you kidding me with this? We're supposed to be planting trees. We're not supposed to be digging for oil in this park.
But the thing is, they put this thing in a public park.
Well, this is totally unacceptable. You understand now, right?
Is there anything we can do about this?
They're entitled to. They have a permit. There's nothing we can do.
Nothing?
The next controversy that we also understood that could happen is how there is an impact. What are the impact results of globalization?
In Latin America, many people experience that globalization from a distance where they don't have a say or an influence in what is happening.
May I give an example of what globalization represents for Latin America? It has a tremendous impact on the class, in which the middle class that once existed is now disappearing or disappeared, making the gap between the rich class and the poor class even wider.
When we now ourselves go through this financial crisis, I think it's important that the Europeans themselves go in and look critically upon the system that has generated this crisis. And I think that the European churches can play an important part in this.
And Rob van Drimmelen, General Secretary of APRODEV, an ecumenical network of European development organizations, was also there. He puts it very bluntly.
Globalization is a two-edged sword. In the past, during the colonial times, the poor were exploited by the rich. And now you see in our time of globalization, they are more excluded from the processes. And I don't know what is worse. At least when you are exploited, you exist. When you exclude, you don't exist at all.
Although the churches and society in Europe are starting to be very eco-minded, it seems that the question has to be raised about the enthusiasm for bioenergy.
The production that is coming from Latin America in terms of food is not necessarily to feed the people, but to be converted into clean fuel.
Big corporations are buying huge amounts of fertile land, and mostly the idea is to grow agro-energy crops on it. And so on one hand, this is a resonance to climate change, but on the other hand, you have the negative effects that you take land which the normal people and the poor people need to survive, to grow agro-energy for us to fill our tanks of the cars, and there is a competition of food or fool.
It is also a call to the government that it is not only important for economic growth, but it's also important to make sure that there is a sustained system of producing food for the people.
All this leads up to the most controversial word used in the General Assembly of the World Council of Churches in 2006, the word empire.
In Europe, this seemed not relevant at all, but in the Latin American churches, it had a connotation of relationship of power that was imposed, not the power that is there to serve.
They felt very much that the cause of the problems of their poverty, of their oppression, of all the problems they suffer, is rooted in a system of domination by the powers, be it state powers, mainly the US, be it transnational corporations, be it military complex, and that all this together was seen as being symbolized in the word of empire. And so that, so to say, the beast of the evil was incorporated in that system where, as the dominating power, the US stands, and where they say, and the Europeans are just the vassals of it.
It is very interesting from the Hungarian perspective, because we have two different experiences from the empire. One is during the socialist system, and I was 18 when the communist system collapsed, because empire before the political change meant a special political pressure and oppression and very much lack of freedom in many ways. And after the political change, we had a very different understanding and very different experience about the empire. And it is very much related to the capital and the capitalist system.
Apparently, under the term empire lies the question, what is the role of the state? A lot of clarification was needed on both sides. But first, let us leave the conference centre and have a drink.
I think the process that we have engaged in, at least in my experience in the ecumenical movement, is quite unique, and is that regional ecumenical organizations join hands and try to address certain issues together.
The reception took place in the Ecumenical Chapel, used for midday prayers for civil servants of the European Union and used by different church communities. Here, in the presence of the General Secretary of CEC, Bishop Murray could speak to a larger audience.
As things are happening here in Europe, I can see them and be part of it in Panama. So communication has been one of those examples that has been, so good in globalization.
In the Conference of European Churches, it's Peter Pavlovich of the Commission for Church and Society who has put his heart and soul into these encounters.
This dialogue served as a cultivation of a method of dialogue, method of overcoming certain problems, certain differences, certain tensions. And we want to offer outcomes of this dialogue for the upcoming Assembly of World Council of Churches. The dialogue between CEC and CLAI can serve as an, perhaps, example, we believe, as an inspiration, which we hope can be developed further and followed by others.
One afternoon, the joint delegation paid a visit to the European Parliament. This brings us to a question for Peter and Rob, both working in Brussels because of the European institutions. Do you have a lot of contact with them? And do they listen to you?
They appreciate it in as much as it is professional work. It's not appreciated because you come from the churches, but it is appreciated because you come with facts and figures and with concrete experiences of people.
This is part of our work and our mandate, to work as a community of churches, as a family of churches, which put its forces together, its strengths together, and try to work vis-à-vis the political institutions of European Union with as much as is possible, with one common voice.
I heard that this afternoon the Bishop Murray gave concrete examples to the members of Parliament here in the European Parliament. And it's those concrete examples that probably speak louder than a whole report about world poverty.
So if you knock on the door, we very often find open doors and readiness to listen to the churches, in particular because we can help to facilitate the feedback for politicians. And this is also what happened today.
Here in the buildings of the European Parliament and Commission, it is all about a common market for the Union's member states. This should lead to a more common European social and political union.
Now, the 60 years experience of uniting Europe is an experience of drawing together of economies. That was, first of all, a peace-building experience because we come out of a terrible European history of worldwide wars coming from Europe and devastating Europe.
The dialogue was an opportunity to discuss the criteria for a good functioning market which responds to social and environmental concerns.
The concept of the word market. In the European Church, market is an opportunity to open doors for exchange to happen and to go on, and for a wider group of people to benefit. In Latin America, the word market gives a connotation of exclusion because there are certain criteria that one needs to fill in order to participate in the market.
But in Latin America, you have the Mercosur, also a common market, isn't it?
In Latin America, the whole process of Mercosur is bringing together countries in the South as one bloc, has been a tremendous opportunity. One of the things that we would like to learn or like to share with our European churches is how do they participate in such a setting with their prophetic voice, and how this participation fosters not only the relationship but the creation of situations that help to produce life.
The churches and others insist on the need for ethical standards as well as social and environmental criteria.
And you cannot have a model of social market economy in your own ranks, and outside your own ranks you act completely differently and forget your ethical standards.
As the dialogue group was meeting in Brussels, the participants were received by the European Parliament's Vice President and by European parliamentarians dealing with the relations between Europe and Latin America, the Eurolat. One member of Parliament explained how he appreciated this encounter with Bishop Murray and the other members of the group.
As an MEP, I think it is very important to stay in contact with civil society, not only with politicians and governments in Latin America. And therefore, I'm really engaged to include, for example, in the summits of the Eurolat, regularly members of the civil society. On both continents, the churches still play an important role in the society. And in most continents, churches understand themselves as a voice of people, and they try to give a voice to people. And sometimes it could be helpful to hear the voice of churches and civil society stronger in these procedures of making reports and legislation. You know, the crisis we have in Europe have to be overcome, and one strategy of the EU is to look for new markets to support growth, but that could not be the sense of a relation between Europe and South America, that we use South America only as a new market to recover our economy.
Back to the conference centre. Another misunderstanding between Latin America and Europe still had to be cleared up. The term socialism.
I think when the term socialism was presented, our sister churches in Europe, they helped us clarify the understanding of socialism.
Yes, actually, this was our specific contribution from Eastern and Central Europe to the dialogue, that we could show a historical experience of socialism to the Latin Americans. And we could show that socialism meant, in a way, it meant a kind of equality to the people. But it was not very simple, but it was accompanied by oppression, by a lot of pain and lack of freedom, and by prison camps. So it was a very difficult time. When we met in Budapest, we showed to the Latin Americans the House of Terror. And this is a kind of museum which shows all the sufferings of the socialist era. And it was shocking for the Latin Americans, because this is not the kind of socialist system that they picture for themselves.
And I thought that was very, very useful, related to the new opportunities that were there for countries that lived in socialism, to now have an opportunity to experience a more participatory type of relationship with politics, using democratic systems.
After the system change, we had very high expectations. It was a lot of happiness and joy that, it is what a good experience to overcome this socialist system. We have never believed that it would end and it would change. And when it changed, everybody thought that it would bring a lot of good experiences, a lot of development, and real freedom to the country.
When we use the term socialism in Latin America, it brings me to the opportunity to introduce another term given by our indigenous groups in the context, which is of good living. Good living means that everybody has access to all that they need for life. Not that some will have more or some will have less, but that everybody will have access. It is the concept of enough for everybody.
And that brought the participants to discuss the role of the state in society.
The moment of change, from my perspective, came when we were in Oslo. We met a functioning welfare state, which enables to mix the market economy and the role of the state.
At the Oslo meeting, I think that's where we had the opportunity to really get a better understanding of the social democratic system and the way it works. And that was very helpful for us.
We agreed to include in our text not only what we agreed upon, but also our disagreements. And that, in a way, opened the space to be honest and to say what you think.
Well, I understand that churches are part of civil society, but do people who believe in God have to deal with all these global questions? What does all this have to do with faith?
Churches are called upon to share the good news from the Bible. And in John 10:10, Jesus presents himself and says, I have come so that you will have life and life abundant.
And it is also in the church history always that the calling of the church is to stay where the people are and to give the promise of God and to work for justice and peace.
We have seen in the practices that human beings have not been very responsible in working side by side with the Jesus mandate of good stewardship of the creation that will enable us to have access to life and life abundant. It's a matter of stewardship. It's a matter of being responsible to the creation and, the way we take care of it or not.
Meanwhile, it's late in the evening, and I still want to ask Rob and Peter the same question. What does all this have to do with faith, with belief in God?
Churches and Christians have to live their faith. It is not enough if they remain with their faith locked in the small rooms. They have to be part of community, be it family, be it church, be it nations, be it community of nations. This is where church and life are connected. And this is why how our faith needs to be. It's a living faith, not isolated from the world we are living in.
God became incarnate in Christ to share the human condition with us. And the Lord's Prayer that was taught to us by Jesus is about both material life and spiritual life. It is about forgiveness of debts, and it's about our daily bread. We cannot separate the meaning of the daily bread from the meaning of the Eucharistic bread.
Well, I think I understood. Is this the end of the process?
The basis has been laid for mutual trust between the churches in Latin America and Europe. And it's on that basis that we can now engage in concrete actions together.
Now we need to convert this into actions to address the injustices in the financial system and to be able also together to fight the enormous challenges coming from climate change.
Now we are very much focused to economical growth and to the materialistic world. And this focus should be shifted to a more human world, shifted to human relations and human values and spiritual, religious values as well.
As we move forward in the dialogue process, we would like to offer this instrument that we have been using, the dialogue instrument, as one that can be used to resolve difficult issues. And in this way, we also will be experiencing and showing concrete actions that promote life and not death.